Hello and welcome to this edition of the VIP Show. In this episode, we will be interviewing a man who has spent the last 25 years of his life trying to expose the truth of the New World Order. The VIP is David Icke. David has helped launch a new TV channel in London called The People's Voice. It aims to provide an alternative platform of information which the mainstream media would not provide. David, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
My first question is about yourself. So talk to us about where you grew up and what did you do in your youth and after that?
Well, I was born in a place called Leicester in the English Midlands, in what we called and still call a working class background. And I always wanted to be a professional footballer. So I worked towards that and I became one at the age of 15, but at 21 my career finished with arthritis. And I went for a second career, which I'd always been very interested in since I was a kid, and that was journalism. So I got a job on a tiny newspaper, and which was the only one that would take me on. And then I went through to work for the BBC eventually. Before I think you could call it I had an awakening of some extraordinary magnitude, an awakening of consciousness, of awareness. And I went off, I left the BBC and went off on a journey of discovery. And basically the questions I was asking was, why is the world as it is? Why is there so much conflict? Why is there so much hunger in a world of plenty? Why is there such a massive gulf between haves and have-nots? Why are there so few people apparently directing the world? And who is directing the world? Is it random decisions by random people, or is it some kind of concerted agenda with a specific end in mind? And I started this journey, and for the last nearly 25 years, I've been to something like 55 countries researching this, trying to find answers to those questions. And I've written a long series of books which has detailed what I've found. And it's been an extraordinary journey. And what has happened is that as events have unfolded in the world, not least since 9/11, things that were in my earlier books, i.e. this is what the agenda wants to achieve and this is the direction it wants to take the world, well, that's precisely the direction the world has gone. And the Orwellian global state, which I've been talking about all these years, is now clearly coming in ever faster. So I've now reached the point where I have, with others, founded a non-profit television station where we're sitting now, called The People's Voice, to not be a voice for me, but to be a voice for information that people do not get through mainstream sources, and also a vehicle for the public to have a say and have a voice and make programs that they think should be made. Because, you know, people think that a few people controlling the world is impossible. It's not. If you have a situation where you control the information and you can compartmentalize the knowledge of what you're trying to do to a few people, so many people are daily making their contribution towards your end without having any idea they're doing so. Only a few know that. And crucial to it is information, because we get our perceptions, which become our actions, become our ways of seeing ourselves and the world, from the information we receive. And if you get that amount of information, you'll have a certain perception of the world. You have that amount of information, you'll have potentially a much greater potential perception of the world. And so when we talk about a few controlling the many, you cannot do that quite demonstrably by numbers, because the few can't physically control the many. So what the few have to do is manipulate the perceptions of the many, so that the perceptions get people to behave in a way that allows this agenda to unfold.
Now, you had a speech on the Oxford Union Debating Society in 2008. You explored the idea of mind control, of the New World Order. Talk to us about what you basically said during that speech. Specifically, let's start with mind control. So is there a machine out there trying to control people's minds?
Well, yes, it's called the global system. What is mind control? You see, people have a perception of mind control that relates basically to a Manchurian candidate, where you mind control an individual who, with certain trigger words or trigger keys, will then carry out an assassination. These, without having any idea afterwards what has happened, these people exist. A lot of people that go crazy with guns in America to justify legislation that the government wants are mind controlled. And these people exist. But what is mind control in its basic form? It is getting someone, or in this case the population in general, to believe something to be true. So every time you read something in a newspaper or hear something in the Western media that tells you this is what has happened, this is how it happened, this is the villain, these are the reasons for all this happening, and it's not true, for everyone that accepts, individually or collectively, that version of events which isn't true, they are being mind controlled because their perceptions are being manipulated. So mind control, perception control, I think is a better way of putting it, is actually operating at multiple levels, from a fiercely robot-like control of an individual mind, if you like, and a Manchurian candidate and all that stuff, to the general population being constantly mind controlled and perception manipulated every day through endless sources. For instance, I mean, look at it. If you are the few and you want to control the many, like I say, you can't do it physically. You've got to have the population with the perception that suits your agenda, that either allows you to do it or even calls you for you to do it, even though they don't realize what the reason for that is. And then you look at the system. We come out of the womb. Immediately, we're hit with programming of perception from parents, often not through most of the time, not because the parents are malevolent. I'm gonna mind control and perception control my children, but because they have been through the system their children are about to go through, and they've bought the program. They've bought the perception program. So out of thinking that that's the way it is, and that's the way everyone should be, they impose that on their children by the daily communication of it and supporting of it. And this is how things should be, this is how you must behave, this is how things are. They then go to school very early in their lives now. I mean, it's out the womb, bit of play, gotcha, get them in the system. So what then happens is, I mean, if you were a small number of people and you were asking the question, how do we could so control the minds and program the minds of children that we turn out the adults with perceptions that suit our agenda, so they'll acquiesce to it and won't question it and accept it? And they would say, well, I don't know if the parents would have it, but the best way to do that, we get hold of the children at a very, very early age, and we have control of what they hear, what they're told is real, what they're told is right, wrong, and all the rest of it, true and not true, from an early age until they become adults and they go out into the adult world. And that we'll control that at least 5 days a week for almost their entire childhood and adolescence. And when they go home, we'll give them homework so they can have some more. And it's an absolutely perfect way of taking young minds, perceptions that have the potential to go anywhere, and to lock them in a box by constantly telling them what's true and not true, and right and wrong and all the rest of it. Now, there are still some people that come through that system. They're here, around us now, who have been through that system but have actually not bought it, or at least later seen through it. But the vast majority of people, children, and I'm talking all over the world here, I'm not just talking about Britain and America, they have their perceptions imposed upon them from the earliest age. And you know, what did they say? Show me the child to the age of 7, I'll show you the man. And that's how it works. And so then you have been through the education system and you've had the system tell you what you should believe. If you're in school and you start to question what they're telling you, immediately, you know, down they come. Hello, Mrs. Smith. There's a problem with Johnny. What's the problem? He's asking questions. They'll all want to do it, right? So punish him. And if you accept the system and you accept what you're told, and then you have this thing called an exam, and you tell the system what it's told you to believe, and you tell it accurately, then you get rewarded with exam passes and with degrees, what I would call degrees of programming. But you're a rebel that won't accept it. I never took a major exam in my life, personally, couldn't stand it. And you get the punishment for that.
Who is it that controls all this? Who are these people in power? Who are these few elites?
I should just add, before I answer that question, on top of the media, on top of the education system rather, you've then got the media telling you the same stuff. You've got peer pressure telling you the same stuff because they've been through the same programming system you have, right? What I started to uncover many, many years ago now, and it goes deeper than this, but on the level that we operate in the world that we see, you can symbolize it as a pyramid or a spider's web. Either is fine. Let's take the spider's web. You've got a few people at the center of the web, but let's call them the spider. They have an agenda for creating a global fascist, communist, they're just expressions of the same thing, fascist, communist, Orwellian state of total control in which they own the world. They want a world government dictating to every country. They want a world army imposing the will of the world government. They want a world currency which is electronic, no cash. And there are massive implications for freedom in that. And you look how fast cash is going out of circulation all over the world. And they want a world central bank dictating all global finance. We now have a European central bank. That's one step from what they really want, which is a world central bank dictating to regional central banks like the European Central Bank, which dictate to the central banks of countries. It's a financial structure even more fiercely imposing its will on the people than we have now. So that's what they want to achieve. But to achieve it on a planet now we're told of more than 7 billion people, first of all they have to keep that enormously quiet, that there is an agenda. They have to make it look as if there are random events which are leading down a certain road, and actually people don't realize that it's a very calculated step-by-step agenda. And also you have got to get, because there's so few of you, you have got to get the target population to imprison themselves. So if you take the spider at the center of the web, and then you've got the strands of the web, and the strands closest to the spider are the most exclusive, most secretive secret societies. And look at a secret society, look at the Freemasons. Someone ought to. It's a pyramid of compartmentalized knowledge. People in the lower degrees have no idea what these in the higher degrees know. And you're not going to get that knowledge unless you are invited by the higher degrees into their sanctum. And so it's all fiercely compartmentalized, even within the secret societies. And then you come further out from the web, and the strands now are starting to reach a point eventually where they're at that cusp where their hidden interfaces with the scene. That's where you get organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations in America that's done so much to dictate foreign policy in the United States. That's where you get things like the Bilderberg Group. The first meeting officially was in 1954 at the Bilderberg Hotel in Holland, where they meet because of, you know, people doing what I do. They don't meet in secret anymore in the sense that people don't know that they're meeting, but what goes on in there is still absolutely secret. And so you come from that point, and now you're coming out into the scene society. You're looking at governments, you're looking at FBIs, you're looking at CIAs and the National Security Agency in America. You're looking at British intelligence and what have you. And then these are organizations, we don't know what they do, but we know they exist. And then eventually you're moving into banking corporations and biotech corporations like Monsanto. You're moving into big pharmaceutical corporations. And but whether it's governments, the pharmaceutical cartel, the biotech cartel, the banking cartel, although we're seeing them here and we're seeing bankers and we're seeing chief executives and all the rest of it, what's directing them is the spider that no one ever sees. And out here, it looks very random. It looks very random, but if you could see it from here, it's not random at all. It's coldly calculated.
You described, you know, all these secret societies, all these groups, as the greatest dictatorship on this earth. Can you elaborate more on that? Why are they the greatest dictatorships?
If you lived in a dictatorship and it was a dictator that you could see and a dictator that imposed his will through the military and all the rest of it, then it's not a pleasant place to be, but you've got some fix on where you are. You are in a situation where this man is dictating the lives of the population via the imposition of his will by a vicious police military operation. At least you know where you stand, and you know basically where the point of control is coming from, although there's more to know even about things like that. But imagine, as we are, that your life is being dictated in a situation where you are told you're free. You are told that you're free because you can vote for someone every 4 or 5 years, even though they're all standing on the same postage stamps in terms of policy. So you're not making a choice at all, because there's no choice to make, because all the parties are now, you know, I mean, look at the Republicans and the Democrats, as some Americans rightly call them. They're the Republicrats. They're one party with two faces. In Britain, where we sit now, you've got the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrat Party, and the Labour Party. I mean, you know, they must have claustrophobia. They're so close in terms of their policy. And the only way that they can sell to people that they're different is through rhetoric, very little else. And so you think that you're free, you think you have choice, when your choices and your freedom are being fundamentally controlled. Because, you know, when the monarchies, the monarchies in Europe that were dictating directly because of their bloodline, their family line, when that started to be rejected by people, because this conspiracy goes back a long, long way. It's not just started or anything like. They had a problem because they had to move to a system where they would still be in control, but the people thought they had some kind of freedom, therefore chilled out in terms of challenging authority. And they went into a party political system to replace the overt royal dictatorships. And if you look at the political system, this is in virtually every country in the world, if you think about it. The political party system is a devastating way of controlling the population, because once you move from a situation where individuals are putting themselves forward for political office and being voted upon according to their history, their policies, their integrity, then it's no longer the will of the people. Say this is the same for a Republican, a Democrat, a Labour Party or Conservative Party in this country. You want to go into politics. if you're going to have any chance whatsoever of getting into politics at a national level, even a local level these days, but certainly a national level, you have to join a party. To join the party, you can just buy a membership, and that's fine. But if you want to go into represent the party politically, you've now got to get accepted to be a parliamentary candidate or stand for Congress. To do that, you have to tell the party what it wants to hear. Otherwise, it's going to say, we're not having you. You're not going to toe the party line. So you then have to give up many of the things that you want to go into politics for, because you won't get into politics if you don't. You then want to progress up the party. You want to eventually become a government minister or prime minister or president or whatever. You have to keep the hierarchy of that party sweet all along the road if you're going to get into that high office. And so a political party is a pyramid. A few dictate the policy, the rest impose the policy. So you cannot be, there is no such thing as political freedom, because parties fiercely impose their will upon their members of parliament, their politicians. And in the end, if you do the research, that party's hierarchy, which is dictating their party in the way I've described, at this level is controlled by the same force that controls that party, which is imposing its will in the same way. And it's there, not here, there, where this, where political policies really come from and are really imposed.
And you would say that Britain and America are probably the biggest dictators in the world?
Oh, I think there are dictators all over the world. In many ways, every country is a dictatorship because of the way it's structured.
But the biggest one?
Well, in terms of impacting itself on world events in the last few centuries, it's certainly been the United States and Britain. And of course, Britain has a long, long history. I remember when I was a kid, little boy, and I started learning about the British Empire, and I couldn't believe it. What? Why is this little why was this little country owning much of the world? It just staggered me that it would ever happen. But there's another way of looking at this. It's not, that wasn't the British Empire, and no one ever uses this phrase, but what we've been looking at in more recent times is actually an American empire. That's what we've been looking at, same thing. And you go back and you look at the Babylonian Empire, and you look at the Russian Empire. These empires are not by the people of those countries, they are by the hierarchy that is based in those countries. And the reason these small islands dictated much of the world, to much of the world overtly for so long under the British Empire, and still do now in cohorts with North America covertly, or more covertly, is because this network of secret societies has certain parts of the world where it has major centers. One is Britain. This is where Britain's power comes from, not from the people, from the fact that it's a major point on this global web. It comes from Rome, not the Italian people, but it comes out of the Roman Church for historical reasons. And it comes out of the United States because the United States is a major center for this network.
So tell us about Zionism in Israel. How powerful are they?
Well, Israel is another major center for this network. And I became interested in that story when I was just a little boy. My father told me about the history of Palestine. Unfortunately, he told me the true history of Palestine. And so when I started investigating how the world was run and what the forces were behind it, of course, Israel was a major area of research. And I would say this about Zionism. Zionism is not about the Jewish people in general. In fact, there are vehement Jewish groups that fiercely oppose Zionism. I would say this from my research. Zionism is the fiefdom of the House of Rothschild, going back to its inception and creation. And it's a secret society. at its core, it's a secret society. There's a secret society at the core which is driving it, which drove the creation of Israel, which is driving the genocide of the Palestinian people now. And then there's another level of it, which is a political, it's a political philosophy about a homeland for Jews in what is called Israel. And most Jewish people around the world have no idea what Zionism is. And what the media and the propaganda has done has completely connect and in the public mind Zionism and Jewish people as if they're interchangeable names. They're not. They are not. Zionism was created specifically to advance this agenda of global control that I'm talking about. And what it has been used for is to be a force of constant irritation, conflict in the Middle East, which has created mayhem in an area of the world that they have long planned to take over. And of course they're in the process of doing that now, if we allow it, with the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, further east with the invasion of, which it was, of Libya, the invasion, which it is, of Syria. The conquest of the Middle East is now well clear underway, and they're trying to hide it by making it seem to be random events and some Arab Spring, which they are manipulating into being. And Zionism is a massive, massive fundamental influence in the United States through the, well, first of all, that group called the Project for the New American Century, this so-called think tank, which when you do the research was fundamentally involved in the creation of the so-called War on Terror and the invasions in the Middle East of Iraq and places like that. And then there's the America-Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, which is just about the biggest lobby group in America, and it's a lobby group on behalf of Israel. And I was only just reading today that the United States has added another something like $500 million in military aid to Israel, which means that this very small area of land with a population of less than 8 million people has something like 3.5 now will have $billion handed to it by the United States every year. And that's only officially. What they do in other ways is massively more than that. This is at a time when people are living in tent cities in America, when people are having food stamps, the most basic subsistence in this economic crisis that they're going through, being cut. But the money handed to Israel every year is never cut. And people have said this. Why would that happen? Very simple. Once you realize this web, which goes into every country, what it is, it's the spider, in this case the Rothschilds, I would say, taking money from America, an arm of the Rothschilds, an arm of the spider, and handing it to Israel, which is just another arm of the Rothschilds, another arm of the spider. This is how it works. This is what, when you realize that there is this hidden hand, this hidden network, things that make no sense on the surface. Why would this country do that? Why would that country do that? It's crazy. You can see how bad it's going to be for the people of that country. That's not the motivation. The motivation is this network. And I'll tell you something else in relation, very much topical to the Middle East. People talk about America, big bad America, and the American military being sent in to bomb Libya and invade Iraq. I would say this after 25 years of research: that is not the American military. It is the American military only officially. That is the military of this hidden hand. And so when people say, quite rightly, Why is the American government spending trillions of dollars a year on this massive military with its AFRICOM and all these other comms they have, where they have different areas of the world given a different American military network to impose its will? Why? Why would the American government be spending trillions of dollars on that abroad when all this mayhem's going on at home? Now, if the American government was representing the American people at their best interest, that would never happen. Never happen. But they're not. The American government is an arm, as the British government is an arm, of this hidden hand. And the hidden hand is driving the policy. So what the American military is, in truth, behind the names and the propaganda, it's the biggest military arm on the planet of this hidden hand. And like I've said already, what they want is a world army imposing the will of a world government. What we're seeing, ironically, in terms of America, is America being used to destroy America. Because militarily and particularly economically, for this reason, if your goal is a world government dictating to every country, you cannot have superpowers who have the financial and military might to say no to you. Otherwise, you're not a world government, are you? You're not a world dictatorship. So what's happening is they're using America, and the American people are just pawns in this game to destroy America financially. I mean, look at it. Every few months now, we're having this farce of a theatre about whether the debt limit should be raised or not. And now they're going to have another go in January or what have you. Already, America is bankrupt. It cannot pay its debts back in any way, shape or form. And yet, they're raising the debt ceiling, like twice a year now. Where's that going to lead? Anyone have any idea where that's going to lead? Where is it going to lead? It's going to lead to a massive crash of the American economy from which it will not be able to recover. And that is the idea. And when you've got people like Ben Bernanke, who has had this period as head of the Federal Reserve, saying we should bring an end to the debt ceiling, he's a Zionist, just like Greenspan, his predecessor, was. Therefore, they are being driven by this secret society that most Jewish people don't even know about, which is the inner core of the Rothschild sanctum, to bring an end to America in terms of a superpower. And all these comms, like AFRICOM and CENTCOM and the Pacific Com and all the rest of it, that the American military has designated as different parts of the world for its different networks, that's not meant to be for the American military. That structure is simply being put in place for the world army.
And do you think they'll succeed in having a one world government?
This is the point. This whole conspiracy has only been possible with its target of 7 billion people, because virtually all of them have no idea it's happening. And so people are not going to challenge something they don't know is happening. Why would they? It's like, in America, they tell people so often, you live in the land of freedom. They shouldn't have to do that if it was really free. It should be obvious. But we're the land of the free. I can buy a McDonald's. What more freedom do you want? And so when people don't know it's going on, they're not going to do anything about it. And so what I've been trying to do now for a quarter of a century, and that many more people who started to understand these things I'm talking about are doing, is trying everything they can to communicate to people information that they will not otherwise receive. Because within that tiny band of information that the mainstream media worldwide, virtually worldwide, is giving people every day, they're not even close to telling people what's really going on, not least because of compartmentalization and the programming through education, etc. Most journalists don't know what's going on. Never mind, most of them are not hiding it, they just don't know. And so we need, through your station, this station, in any way we can, we need to join together, I'm not a Muslim, and I'm not religious. But if I say, well, your problem's not my problem because I don't think like you do, and you say my problem's not your problem because I don't agree with how you see the world, then there's the divide and rule that plays the 7 billion off against each other through alternative religions, income brackets, races, colours, whatever. And while we're fighting each other, the few are playing the game to push their agenda on. It's like, in places like, Syria and Libya and what. Why are you fighting each other? Why are you fighting each other? Because ultimately, you're fighting for your and your children's and your grandchildren's enslavement by allowing this divide and rule to go on that allows the hidden hand to move on in terms of its conquest of country after country. Look what it's done in Libya. It's turned it into a chaotic nightmare, which suits the agenda, because what they want to destroy is anything that holds people together. Anything that holds people together, including the family. And so we need to come together, irrespective of our color, religion, creed, culture, and realize that this force is targeting all of us. And when we've got rid of this force, then we can sit round and have a chat about what we think. But at this moment, we need to come together and stop arguing about what we believe and don't believe, and start realizing that if we don't come together, then this will succeed. And it doesn't have to. How can a relative handful of people in the shadows dictate the lives of 7 billion? Is that possible? 2 ways, main ways. One, the fact they're doing it is secret, so no one thinks that they have to challenge what he's doing it because they don't realize it's happening. 2, divide and rule the population along manufactured fault lines, so while they're fighting each other, we can go about our business unchallenged. We must come together and not allow this divide and rule to continue. Because if it happens and it continues, they will get what they want. I don't believe they will. I don't believe they will. And that's what keeps me going every day.